Hello everyone, welcome to another Sunday. The first thing I'm going to do is just pop up where you can get this soundtrack from today, scientificsounds.com/BodyMind-Journey. Pay attention to the capitals, body, mind, -journey. This is where you can go to make comments or ask any questions. Have to do with anything that I've covered on these live streams. scientificsounds.com/ask-a-question. Pay attention to the capitals. And this is where you can go to see all the live streams I've done since the beginning, over a year ago. In addition, I do have new workshops that I'm putting on. I do have the biotuning practitioners training workshop, which, people who want to get trained to become a sort of a high-tech 21st century sound therapist. But I used to do a whole series of general workshops about the power of sound for healing and the power of sound for brain entrainment and changing consciousness, sort of high-tech meditation. I had a series of workshops like that. They would be a day-long workshop overview of sound from the ancient past into the 21st century future and where it is now and where it's going. And I'm starting to do those again. Here's the address for that. Center for Neuroacoustic Research.com webinars. So you can go here, that's a page on our website, and see which of these webinars I'm putting on and what they cover and what they are, when they are, how much they are, all that stuff. So that being said, like I said with this, this is where you can go back and look and see all of the live streams that I've done up to this point, except for one, of course. As many of you will notice that last week's broadcast was censored by YouTube and removed. So now I am in good company of the dissidents of the world who think for themselves and speak truth to power. The problem is that the platform that I'm using to speak that truth is under the control of someone who can completely shut me down. So that's where you have to sort of, lick your wounds and check that one off to the other side one for now, at least in that platform. So this is the notice that I got. This is the one that was removed. I like that little face there. Little weird face. However, for those of you who missed it or wanted to go back, I had a number of people who contacted me and said, what happened to the video? It seems to be gone, not removed or something. And I wanted to go back and take some notes. And that has been permanently removed. It's not there anymore. YouTube has taken it down. But it's still available on YouTube, my personal YouTube channel, Dr. Jeffrey Thompson. Facebook. So go to Facebook and in the search function, search for Dr. Jeffrey Thompson. You'll come to this site here. And over in this far column, or actually here in this column, you scroll down and you'll eventually come to this video. It's not far down. It's just 2 or 3 scrolls. And here's that video. So you can still see it. It's still there. And, you know, of course, they don't tell you exactly what it was in your video that had them, you know, remove it. What about it was breaking the rules of their community service? But I think we all know what it was that is you're not able to talk about. You're not able to mention anything except wonderful, glowing terms. So I will avoid that. But now we are in the company of some of the finest minds, the most critical thinkers in history, the people who, you know, like I said before, there's the 80-20 rule in the universe. And that is basically what bell curve studies are all about. And the universe at large, in the big sense, tends to be always falling in line with the statistical average. The universe itself at large always falls within these parameters, 80-20 on a bell curve. So 80% of the people will always do this, and 20% will always be this. It also forms, I've actually discussed this before, the 80-20 rule even affects me in my physical body. 80% of my body is supporting tissue, blood and bone and water and cell membranes and stuff like that. 20% is governing tissue, and governing tissue, brainstem, spinal cord, nerve roots, that's who controls the 80%, tells it what to do, receives signals from it. 2% is of that 20% is what is really calling the shots, and that would be the origin of the parasympathetic nervous system, the anterior hypothalamic nuclei. So the hypothalamus would be the 2% of the 20% of the control system, which controls the 80% that is passive and is waiting for directions and orders. You can see a similar setup in how society itself is put together. 80% of the population of the people of the planet are, quote, supporting tissue. They're the people who don't question, who look for others to sort of set the tones of how they should live and what they should look like and what kind of things they should buy and what kind of jobs they should have and how you should sort of live your life. Is sort of not the non-critical thinkers who it doesn't occur to them to try to research something out of on their own. They look for their leaders to have done that, to tell them what to do or how to think or how to be. They get their cues for how they should look and what kind of things they should buy from advertisements on television or from social pressure groups. These are the people who have what I call herd mentality. People are looking for the cues of what they should believe and what they should think and what they should look like and what kind of jobs they should have and how they should live their lives from cues from the social network that they're part of, from society at large and what everybody else is doing. That's pretty much that scene. The 20% of the bell curve out at the edges don't conform to that at all. Those would be critical thinkers, people who think for themselves and don't accept anything without looking one step deeper into it before you just accept whatever is told to you is so, or is the truth, or what you should do, or who kind of says, well, everybody else is doing it, it must be okay. No, that's the 20% think for themselves. Those tend to be the scientists of inquiry. But within even the scientific group, 80% of the scientists are the sort of conformists who look to the scientific community herd to sculpt the way they think about things in whatever that box is. And a good example of that would be the fact that I was able to discover this epsilon brainwave frequency on an EEG machine, which was the first one available that you could plug into your home computer and fire things up without buying a $30,000 system that was a complete kind of system made only for EEG, where the scientific community in EEG was so firmly convinced through herd mentality that the only brainwaves that exist, and it's confirmed and it's a done deal, is beta, alpha, theta, delta. And on my machine, I'm seeing below delta activity. And later when I talked to EEG researchers that I did clinical work with, they confirmed that they wouldn't be able to see below delta activity because their machines don't show it. Their machines only show down to 1 hertz. Doesn't even show the full brainwave range. The lowest brainwave range of delta is 0.5 hertz, and these machines didn't even show that. So because they didn't believe that anything existed outside of this predetermined box, they created their machines to only look within this box and not outside the box. So they couldn't discover a below delta brain activity of what I eventually called epsilon. They couldn't discover it even if it was there because their equipment had blinders on. And so that's an example of the 80% and the 20% who question and who understand this 80-20 rule. So it's an element of critical thinking, and it's an element of critical thinking that has to do with spirituality as well. Because in spirituality, most of the people look upon themselves as, I don't know how to describe it, look upon themselves as not capable or not worthy, or that happens to somebody else, not me. Not recognizing that I have all the equipment I need already within me to be a master. That I am a master light being in the universe. And I'm covered over by an ordinary personality who believes that that is not so, because my social network tells me that. My 80% of who I get my cues from convince me that I'm ordinary and that I am not the special material that enlightenment is made of, or that personal revelation comes from. That comes from other people that you read about or see in movies. The masters, those are special people. Those are extraordinary people that are, above and beyond. Where, particularly in America and the United States, we tend to be taught that more than most countries because of the heavy Christian tradition here. And the Christian tradition is based on the fact that the idea of Jesus was a divine being. God himself descended into physical form from an immaculate conception. So our role model spiritually is unattainable for us. We are regular proletariats, and Jesus is the king of special circumstance, born of a mother with no physical father, And even when he died, he rose again from the grave. So this is telling us that that is unattainable for us, that we need to follow that we need to bow to that, we need to worship that. That is never going to be attainable to us. Whereas the other traditions say Buddhism, where the role model of Buddhism was a regular man. Siddhartha, who is a wealthy young man, came from a very wealthy family, and through a series of circumstances began to wake up, and eventually renounced all of the wealth and renounced everything, and became a sadhu who, wore a robe and was penniless and wandered the roads seeking enlightenment, and found that enlightenment as a regular man who renounced everything, which means that role model is attainable. That means that if one human being could reach divine enlightenment, so could anyone through that same path. So the idea that I am not up to that task cosmically, or I am, depending on what your point of view is this idea of the 80-20 rule, where I believe that I'm ordinary and I have to break that, and I have to become part of the 20% where I critically think for myself and realize that that's an illusion, that that's baloney, that what is described in pretty much all religions is a human construction that is crystallized around a spiritual idea that has no bounds and that cannot be contained in dogma, that I have to break that in myself. I have to break the dogma of my own mind and my belief systems and set myself free of belief systems completely in order to get a taste of the present moment before a thought, before the conceptions that thinking crystallizes as dogma. When that gets broken, I really realize that I myself am the center of all that's happening, and that enlightenment springs through the core and the center of my being, as it does through all beings, because all beings are the same, one thing, in many apparent forms that I also have to break out of. Some of my favorite authors and favorite philosophers and throughout history, who I'm great fans of. It's the reason I love, Einstein and what he's up to, and Carl Jung and what he's up to, and Milton Erickson and neurolinguistic programming and various authors. For instance, one of my favorite authors is this woman, Ursula Le Guin. We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art, and very often in our art, the art of words. This is the book. Of course, I'm a big fan of her, so I got the Earthsea trilogy, which actually was published in 3 books. I have the big one. I also have a big version of this, of Tolkien's trilogy, which was 3 books, and it's all in one giant book. This book, the Earthsea trilogy, is the foundation of where eventually sort of Harry Potter took his storyline from, where that story arose. So J.R.R. Tolkien is another big famous one of mine. And Frank Herbert and the book Dune. So if you haven't read these, then I would suggest to go and open your mind. Dune by Frank Herbert. Won every award that there is possible to win. Probably the most famous science fiction book in history. And if you haven't read it, never mind the movie. Read the book. Read Tolkien's trilogy. The book covers about 80% of that book, but the 20% is mind-blowing. And I would suggest Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea trilogy, also just a mind-blowing book. I would also suggest perhaps to go back and revisit George Orwell's books. The main book, of course, is, his book 1984. I read this book when I was in high school, and that was back, in the mid-'60s. But where, we see these powerful ideas that still are resonating today. And we sort of see, the kind of things that were described in his book active today, sort of all the time. People working in these cubicles with a television with Big Brother watching and cameras everywhere. And, does that sound familiar? I mean, any street corner, every building, every stoplight has cameras pointed everywhere. We are under surveillance all the time. This is straight from 1984. And, now we're being watched and listened to. The way the 21st century has panned out has gone far beyond anything that George Orwell ever dreamed was going on. But the concept of the, Orwellian doublespeak and double thought, where doublespeak is gaslighting. If you remember from the movie, the main protagonist of the movie worked in one of these cubicles in a place called the Ministry of Truth. And his job was to scour throughout all the past articles and newspapers and magazines and television newscasts and everything else to edit them and edit out anything in the past that didn't agree with the current party line story. And the current party line story was filled with remaking history and filled with lies to repaint all of history to support the current agenda of lies that was being told to the public. So anything that disagreed with that in the past needed to be manipulated, erased, redone to agree with present policy. And of course, whatever it was that was the message that was put out by the state as the truth, most people just accepted that. 20% of the people who had a critical thinking faculty just had to remain silent because you would be taken away by the thought police. You'd be removed. They'd never see you again. 2% of those people were the true revolutionaries, which is this dystopian kind of story about this one guy and how he became that. So, I have a huge presence of my work in Asia. Asia is really a perfect place for what I'm doing because there's an ancient tradition that centers itself in holistic health with acupuncture and Chinese medicine, herbs and things like that, and meditation. And there's a fascination with anything high-tech. So when I start talking about high-tech meditation and high-tech use of sound for rebalancing the autonomic nervous system in a scientific way with ancient tools of sound, then that is the society who really, there is no prejudice there in Taiwan, in particular Taiwan, with Taiwan and Japan and Korea and portions of China. No prejudice against holistic health ideas. The medical system there, hospital system, the research institutes, the major universities are 100% open to holistic ideas. When I go there and I'm a keynote speaker at huge holistic conferences, one I did there years ago was called Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Therapies. Although I have big issues with the idea of complementary and alternative. Excuse me, complementary to what and alternative to who? You know, this is implying these are labels generated in the pharmaceutical industry and the American Medical Association to try to label the competition, the holistic competition, in a secondary light. Like, of course, buried in those words, complementary and alternative, is the fact that they are alternative and complementary to the main system, which they're painting themselves to be. We are the main system. We are the go-to system. Everybody else is just kind of futzing around the edge, and they don't really have it. We have it. And therefore, we will refer to them as complementary and to us and alternative to us. But us is the big one. Of course, everybody realizes that, right? And that's where those the ads on television is. Ask your doctor, see your doctor, your doctor. Of course, you have to have your doctor because we're the default system. And what we believe is scientific, and what those alternative and complementaries are is pseudo-scientific. And that's the world that we live in. Until you realize, after you go through that system, when you actually get health problems, and you realize that for all intents and purposes, unless you're in ICU where they're saving your life with a heroic, or in an emergency ward after an accident where they're heroically saving your life, everything in between is kind of like they don't really know what to do. So they throw different pills at you, different medications, and if it doesn't work, they try a different one, or they try a surgery. It's not their strong suit. But the disturbing thing in China is that they now are, moving to their next step. China is far beyond the United States in surveillance of its citizens, which is sort of amazing to even contemplate, because we are unbelievably surveyed. Every phone call, every email, every photograph, every movie you take, everything that ever happens on your cell phone, the NSA knows about it. They have it. It's stored. Your movements are cataloged through all the cameras on all the streets. Every movement, everything you buy, it's all captured. It's all somewhere. And China is more than that. They've really increased their ability to do metrics, biometrics. They're not only can recognize your face, they can recognize your gait, how you move your body. So they can really recognize, hundreds of thousands of people on a street scene and know and identify every single person there, who they are, walk. And now they have a social scoring system that is just entering in, where all of your movements, all the things you buy, and all the things you say, and all the things you do, if you speed, if you jaywalk, if you say something bad to somebody, if you treat somebody badly, whatever it is, those are dings against your social score. Sort of like your credit report, except it's not banking. It's your behavior, your behavioral credit report. And if you get enough dings, then you can't take a bus. You can't get a cab. You can't get on a plane. Your abilities to do things are restricted. So that's where they're going with this. That is, sort of straight out of George Orwell and what he was talking about with the surveillance and Big Brother was watching you. They would have Hate Week for 1 hour, and the screens would show all the enemies of the state, and they'd work people up into a screaming, hateful frenzy once a week against the enemy. Very powerful stuff. But cooperate and obey, do what the state tells you, because we are watching and there's punishments to happen, which is, sort of right out of this here. You're not allowed to talk about certain things critically. If they could stop you from thinking those things, they would do that too. The concept of the thought police. This idea of, in George Orwell, you see this thing, ingsoc, all the time. This ingsoc. Ingsoc, Ingsoc was called Newspeak, which means they reinvent language for their own political purposes. Newspeak for English socialism, or the English Socialist Party, is the fictional political party of the totalitarian government Oceania in George Orwell's novel 1984. So the idea of Ingsoc, English socialism, where the reality of what they were pushing with the concept of Ingsoc was the opposite of that, which is what Newspeak is all about, where the Ministry of Truth was all about, to perpetuate a lie and clothe it in a title which communicated to the mind the opposite of what it actually was. For instance, in the present political situation, you have something, a legislation that tries to push the idea of workers, the right to work law. The right to work law is really appears to communicate the idea that I have a right to get a job if I want a job. And what it's really about is legislation that allows corporations to pay a worker anything they want without a minimum wage. So it's the right for corporations to pay starvation wages with no limit set of how low they can pay you, to basically let the market get away with whatever the market can bear. So if I can get some stupid people to come in and work for $3 an hour, then that should be my right. And that's the right to work law, which sounds like it's coming from the standpoint of the workers, but it's actually not. It's coming from the standpoint of the corporations who hire. They don't want $7.25 an hour minimum wage, or a $15 a minimum wage, or whatever. They want no minimum wage. And that's an example of Newspeak, or doublespeak. Doublespeak means you double back on it. It's the title is the opposite of what it's actually trying to say. So when we look at George Orwell, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Truth to power. The further a society drifts from truth, the more it will hate those who speak it and penalize those who speak it. The concept of ignorance is strength. This is doublespeak. For the good of the party, think less. War is peace. freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. This is similar to the concept of when one country is invading another country. The people who are trying to fight off the invaders are called insurgents, and the ones who are invading are called freedom fighters. History, whoever wins the battles writes the history from their point of view. Why, the genocide of the American Indians, 100 million people in the United States were killed and had their land stolen. And that's not in any history book. That's not in any class that we're taught. The Indians were the bad guys who were attacking the innocent settlers. But if the Indians had won, then the history would be written a very different way. It would be a different viewpoint. It wouldn't sound the same. And then there was this guy, Aldous Huxley, that men do not learn very much from the lessons of history is the most important of all lessons that history has to teach. That the truth of history is hard to find because history is written by the victors from a person's point of view to make them always in the best light, not as an objective lesson of history. And of course, he wrote this book, The Brave New World, another book that's a mind blower to read. And the whole idea about that book was also very similar to what was happening in 1984. Because in 1984, it was illegal to fall in love, and that's what happens. They fall in love, and then they get caught. And the same thing in Brave New World. It's illegal to fall in love, and everybody has these pills they have to take every day, and it's monitored, right? There's an AI kind of voice that's always there with you. There's cameras every place. There's a camera inside of your medicine cabinet in your bathroom. When you open up the medicine cabinet, it's reminding you have to take your pills, and then the camera is watching you take the pills every day to make sure that you take the pills. You have to take the pills in front of the camera. And then this is a story about, somebody who palms the pills and starts to wake up and falls in love, and, that kind of thing. So Brave New World also had to do with the fact that sex and love were banished, that all babies were test tube babies. That means that the whole society was test tube people without mothers and fathers who were brought up by the state in large groups. George Orwell and Aldous Huxley actually knew each other. Aldous Huxley was teaching at Eton College in England, teaching French class, and George Orwell was a student in that class. And they became friends and shared with each other their manuscripts and their writings. Aldous Huxley would give critiques of George Orwell's new book, 1984. Kind of interesting that they were contemporaries and actually, sort of knew each other, and they were kind of on the same sort of pathway. Aldous Huxley, there will be in the next generation or so a pharmacological method of making people love their servitude and producing dictatorship without tears, so to speak, producing a kind of painless concentration camp for entire societies, so that people will in fact have their liberties taken away from them, but will rather enjoy it because they will be distracted from any desire to rebel by propaganda or brainwashing enhanced by the pharmacological methods. And this seems to be the final revolution. Now, of course, it's television, it's radio, it's social media, it's cell phones in our face, it's media controlled by big money concerns who are putting out a dialogue. So in all of history of humanity, it's more difficult than ever to resist that, to be a 20%er, and question everything, question authority, question what is being told, never accept just on the plate that it's delivered to you by higher forces, never just accept what's told to you as being the gospel truth. Look deeper, check into it on your own. What is it that they're not telling you? What is it that's being hidden? What is it that's in particular being ostracized if you talk about it? Now, of course, things have gotten more weird because it appears that politically taking on George Orwell's ideas and Aldous Huxley's ideas in using those specifically for political purposes, where you're intentionally lying, you're intentionally pulling the untruths, is very similar to what was happening in Nazi Germany. That was the idea. Tell the lie and tell the lie big. Make sure the bigger the lie and you repeat that lie all the time, eventually that becomes the truth. That was George Goebbels. The propaganda minister was somebody who was saying those kind of things, and it worked. But now that that's happened in the past, it doesn't work as well in the present as it did in the past, but it still works. You see huge gatherings of people who buy the lies, which makes it more difficult to tell the truth as a 20%er, where it's all mixed up with people who are specifically telling lies, so it all becomes very much more difficult road to tread. Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. So, like I said, these two guys knew each other. And that story and similar stories are told all the time. One of my other favorites is, of course, George Lucas. Way back in the beginning, when he was a young man, his first film ever was when he was still a student. But you have to remember, he was privileged. He came from Hollywood families and knew a lot of big-name stars, so he could actually get these big-name stars to star in his student film, his first film that went on the market, which was this film called THX 1138. I would say you should probably check that film out. It's pretty cool. I saw that years ago because I used to be a filmmaker, so I'm into all this stuff. Here is THX 1138. Let's see what's inside here. George Lucas's first film before Star Wars, with some major stars: Robert Duvall, Donald Pleasance. I mean, yeah, pretty amazing. Francis Ford Coppola, executive director, executive producer. And so here again we have another dystopian story where everyone in the future has shaved heads and wears the same kind of clothing. It's illegal to fall in love. Everybody has to take their pills. Cameras are watching everything. Look at George Lucas here. Oh my God. And Robert Duvall. And you would go to confession. There would be this kind of digital picture of Christ, who would have a robot voice that would talk to you and tell you just to take an extra pill. And if you got caught, without your pills or falling in love, then you were arrested by the thought police. And in this iconic scene where, Robert Duvall misses some of his pills and realizes he's starting to wake up and starts to palm his pills and not take them. And as soon as you wake up to a certain point, he starts to realize that he can see there's a woman who's not taking her pills too, because everybody else is sort of mind numbed and asleep, but the people who are awake can see each other from across the room. They fall in love. That's illegal. He's eventually caught by the thought police. And just as in George Orwell's, where they tortured him in room 101, this torture was much more physical and subtle. But it always interested me that the charge was criminal drug evasion. Which is where we're sort of going now with, in the present world. And then this became George Lucas, after Star Wars, this THX idea became his spatial audio system for movie theaters. So in the beginning of the movie theater, there'd always be this kind of, splash screen with the THX thing with a cool sound thing that happened. As a matter of fact, I collected that. So let's have a look at this. Let's see if I can pull this off. Here we go. Cool, eh? So yeah, a little bit of fun. So as we go back into, George Lucas graduating from that with huge success, it was sort of a sleeper film. The whole Star Wars idea in 1977, I'll never forget it. I mean, I was a filmmaker. I had 24 films. My first film when I was 11 was my first experiments in special effects. I was a big nerd on special effects. It was a pair of my shoes walking across a dirt road. Animated, stop motion animation. When I was 12, I couldn't sleep on the lower bed because I had a plywood sheet there with a space city, with a spaceport with flying saucers, and I was doing a stop animation movie of a big creature attacking, and it was me. It was me in those years. So I was a big expert on special effects. And when I saw Star Wars the first time, the special effects blew my mind. I couldn't figure it out. I could always figure out what was going on. This was... I just couldn't, I didn't get it. And what he had done is he had invented a whole new industry. He invented his own cameras, invented his own computer systems with robot arms that held the cameras with motors so that the camera would move in a pre-programmed movement sequence that would marry itself with what's called traveling mats that mask out certain parts of the film, that you can impose something else on it flawlessly. You could only do that with computers. So he invented a whole industry. And the industry of the special effects for Star Wars that blew everybody's minds and reset the industry completely, which now equals what we currently see on the screen. The level of CGI effects is now almost completely flawless. But its beginning was this company that he formed with a guy named Douglas Trumbull. Douglas Trumbull formed the special effects unit for George Lucas and eventually formed that into its own company called Industrial Light and Magic, which went on to be the go-to place for special effects for all kinds of films in the industry. Everybody wanted to go to Industrial Light and Magic. Of course, in the beginning, they were the only game in town. And then there was a bunch of spin-off industries that began to get into that game as well. Douglas Trumbull was the guy behind it all. And he became so wealthy, he sold that company and went off on a couple of pet projects of his own. One project was called ShowScan. And I knew people in the industry at that time and got a showing of ShowScan along with 60 other people in a big giant theater like this with special sound system and these monster screens. What he was trying to do was take the normal 24 frames per second, which has a sort of a subconscious flicker on the screen, and increase the speed to various things, 40 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 100 frames per second, and project it at that speed so that we didn't have the blur that happens in a movement. He discovered that at 60 frames per second was even better than 100. The images on the screen became just an illusion of 3D. They seemed to be just pop out and be real without any kind of special glasses or anything. Why? Because the scan rate of the visual cortex is around 60 hertz. Interesting that is the rate of AC current in your walls and seems to align with the visual cortex scan speed. That means that whenever the brain neurons that control your eyes are on, the image on the screen is there. And when they're off between the next on, the screen goes off and comes back on, so it's in sync. So there is no flicker. The flicker is completely disappeared. That is a flawless 100% image, which fools your brain into thinking it's 3D. Also, his second project was a movie called Brainstorm. And if you haven't seen this film, you should go and find that film and see it. This is another sleeper film that you may not have heard of. And Christopher Walken, Natalie Wood, this was the last film she made before she died. She died in a horrible accident, fell over a boat in a lake and drowned. And drowning was her secret fear. She was deathly afraid of dying by drowning, and she did drown towards the end of when this film was being shot. Once again, I have that film, Brainstorm. An awesome, mind-blowing film. So this film, they have this gadget that goes on your head, and it records your brain, everything that's happening in your brain, and produces it as a film. It can film your thoughts, film your dreams, film your emotions. It captures it. And when somebody else plays it, experience what you experience emotionally and mentally, and whatever was happening for you could be recorded onto a film. Pretty mind-blowing little film that is. I highly recommend this film for a wonderful little mind blower. just chock full of really great stars. It's a great story. And all of these things back into where we have current scientists who are questioning whether our reality might be a simulation, that this all might be some dream in a mind-controlled helmet. A matrix, right? The matrix, where you're plugged in and you're floating in some kind of a capsule with tubes in your brain, you know. And the whole present environment of the 80-20 rule and lies flying around all over the place, and social pressures to behave a certain way and to believe a certain way, which make it more and more and more difficult for us to think for ourselves and to have a critical mind. And the answer is what we're doing, in my opinion. It's to arrive at the cosmic place in ourselves where the only truth that actually exists is here in the present moment, before a thought, before that dialogue, before the lies have a possibility of coming out through your mouth or occurring in a thought. Before you have the possibility of thinking a lie is the truth. Here, now. The ancient practices of meditation and action, meditation in general, coming into myself in a pristine and pure place. And one of the good places to find that place in myself is in nature. In the woods and the fields and the streams with other creatures and animals, the quiet of nature is where we can find that place in ourselves again. Finding the truth. Finding the truth here in this world, it becomes difficult because, I guess in a way, it sucks to wake up. That's a t-shirt, by the way. It sucks to wake up. Because when you wake up, you see a world of suffering all around you. You see a world of asleep people controlled against their own best interests, and willingly accepting it and fighting tooth and nail to remain in jail in their mind, in their soul, in their heart. Even when they're dying of cancer, they will fight tooth and claw to remain who they are, even though it's killing them. And certain people have seen that, you know. Gloria Steinem, the great activist for women, you know. The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. When you wake up and you wake up in this world, you get pissed. You get pissed off to see how solidly it's corrupted and how bought and sold the whole thing is. And the majority of people are to accept that and fight on its behalf against their own interests. But the other great thinkers that evolved out of that return to the core of where true ideas and truth comes from. Favorites, of course, is Louise Hay. I am in the right place, in the right time, doing the right thing. She had a way of cutting through the cloud to the simplest of truth that somehow just rang your bell. I am in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, right now. And there, by making that statement, you make it so. It becomes so. But you have to make this statement from your heart. You have to feel this statement. It's not just reading words off a page. You have to allow it inside yourself and grok it, so to speak. Remember, you have been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens. How cool. Here's another one. Life is a lottery that we've already won, but most people have not cashed in their tickets. I did a broadcast based on that sort of idea that when the sperm hit the egg, that was us. We won. We won that race against 50 million sperm. We won. We pulled whatever is necessary out of our toenails and we won the gold medal. And the prize is a body in this world, in the biggest game in town, the biggest game in the universe. And all of us are gold medal winners. We all won the lottery, except it wasn't a lottery. It wasn't by chance. Something happened. We did that, part of it. So don't tell me you can't do it. Don't tell me you don't know what it takes. You've already done it. That's why you're here. You need to find that spot again. Pull it up. Pull it out of your toenails. And march into the world with a force and a power. And allow the world to conform to the idea that you're putting out, which is the idea of why I'm here and what I'm here for and what I'm here to do. One of my favorite things from Louise was, I will not should on myself today. What an amazing person. Some of these are photos that I took that nobody will ever see, that nobody's ever seen. So like that one. This one, we were at a restaurant and I had bought this pair of glasses with sunglasses folded up, and she thought that was just the greatest thing. Above all, she loved to break every rule and make people uncomfortable. Just break the rules. Yeah. That's one of my favorite pictures of us together. In the infinity of life, where I am, all is perfect, whole, and complete. So with that thought resonating in your heart and your mind, we're going to go on our sound journey, a meditative space to find that place in ourselves where the truth exists before the hoopla in this world that's flying at you, to cut through and find the truth of it for yourself, aside from what people are trying to sell you as an idea. By the way, when I got, censored by YouTube, which was a real shocker to me, it was interesting. Oh, look at this. That's interesting. I guess that now I have officially graduated to, a sort of a new status here in life. Here I am. So here we are, folks. Whether you thought it was before or not, you are following a true 2%er of the 20% of the 80%. So I encourage you to do the same. Think for yourself. Don't accept whatever anybody tells you. Always have a critical mind. And so the first thing that happened to me when I realized I had been censored was go to my master and consult the I Ching to find out what the heck does this mean? What is the correct way to deal with this conundrum when this is one of the 64 situations? And this is the hexagram I got. You might write these down, number 42 and 25, with the fourth line moving So if you have the Wilhelm Baines edition, you look this up and you read only the fourth line moving of these two hexagrams. Increase and innocence, of course, the unexpected, duh. And if you don't have the book, you can go online and look it up. Look up those two hexagrams. Just type in a Google search for number 42 increase. And you can even stipulate that it's the Wilhelm Baines interpretation. And you'll see that. Meantime, here we go. Inner truth. Close your eyes. And here we go. here's where you can get this soundtrack. scientificsounds.com, BodyMind-Journey. As always, thank you all. My privilege and my honor to be here with you and to have you here every week. For anyone who's new, go and look at all the live streams I've done before and start checking them out one at a time. They build on each other. So you'll see me always referring to past live streams where I really flesh the information out that I might just be touching on or mentioning in passing. So thank